This is the Rich Dad Radio Show. The good news and bad news about money. Here's Robert Kiyosaki.
Hello. It's Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news about money. So way back in 1999, I started writing about this thing called the biggest crash in history coming. And I said it would come around 2016. Well, I was about a year and a half off. The crash began in September of 2018. And what's going to cause the crash is pensions, retirement plans. And so I'm still hold to my guns. I said, I want you to listen to this program because we're talking about one of the biggest financial crises hitting my generation, which is the baby boom generation. And many of them, as you know, don't have much to fall back on. And if there's a crash, many 401ks, many public pensions and private pensions, and things will go to hell. So that's why we have the Rich Dad Radio Show to prepare you, and you can make up your own mind what you want to do. But the biggest crash has already started, and it has to do with pensions. How long it'll take to come to fruition, nobody knows. So our special guest today is Ted Siedle. He's the founder of Benchmark Financial Services, Incorporated. He is an authority on investment management, security matters, and retirement systems. Benchmark is a firm that pioneered the emerging field of forensic investigations of the money management industry and has conducted intelligence investigations worldwide involving excess of $1 trillion in assets under management. So he's looking for the crooks inside our pension plans. So today you're going to learn a lot about why our pension system is the next subprime crash. So welcome to the program, Ted.
Thank you for inviting me.
Hey, we were talking before we got on air. You have a very interesting background. And we started by saying you don't have a high school diploma. So would you tell the audience how that happened?
Sure. People often ask me how I got involved in the forensic work that I do. I grew up overseas in the Caribbean, South America, and East Africa. And at age 16, my father disappeared in Africa, in Uganda, East Africa. And nobody knew what had happened to him. So I came back to the United States just before my 17th birthday. I had not gone to high school in the United States, not gone to 10th, 11th, or 12th grade. And I was essentially orphaned and penniless. Since my father had disappeared in East Africa and they couldn't find his body, his estate couldn't be probated, his life insurance wouldn't pay, his Social Security survivor benefits wouldn't pay. He was missing and presumed dead, but not legally declared dead. So, fortunately, on the education front, I was able, within a year, I was accepted early into college. And so I went straight into college after 10th grade without ever getting a high school diploma. So the bad news is I never got a high school diploma. The good news is I got accepted into college early. And you
went to law school and all that?
Yeah, after graduating from college, I went to law school and became a lawyer after that. But it was a very difficult time, and that experience of I had to bring a lawsuit against a foreign dictator, against Idi Amin, the president of Uganda, an international lawsuit, hiring a team of lawyers in Washington, D.C. So that kind of compelled me to consider a career in law. I would not have gone to law school, I can tell you right now, had my father not been murdered. And then I forensically had to investigate what happened to him, and I ultimately went back to East Africa in 1997 to find his body and to meet the people who killed him. So that's the short story of how I ended up focusing on the forensic side of the money management industry.
In general parlance, sometimes people call you a whistleblower, but also the word is forensic. You go back in and you look into the records of things, and that's how you became, quote-unquote, a whistleblower. What does that mean to the general public?
Well, being a whistleblower means that you become aware of wrongdoing. either within your company or around you, either within the company you work or around you. And, honestly, most people, when they are made aware of illegal or wrongdoing at their employer, they keep their mouth shut. It's not human nature to want to piss people off by, particularly your boss, by confronting people about the wrongdoing. So, 9 out of 10 people, when being made aware that there's something really bad happening at their company, will keep their mouth shut. But whistleblowers are people who choose to contact authorities and tell the story about the wrongdoing around them.
A whistleblower, if you're proven correct, you're awarded part of the fines or whatever it is that the fraudulent company is involved in.
Today, that is the case. I first became a whistleblower in 1988 when I was employed at a large mutual fund company, and as director of compliance, I became aware of illegal activity, and I reported it quietly. It's what's called blowing a silent whistle. I did not go public. Back then, there were no financial rewards or few for whistleblowers. After Dodd-Frank, the SEC and other regulators, financial regulators in Washington, now have vibrant whistleblower programs, and yes, you can receive financial awards for blowing the whistle.
And the reason you're on the Rich Dad Radio Show with me, I think you and I share a common concern, because as you're investigating many pension plans and funds and, fraudulent activities going on or corrupt activities going on, would you say that the baby boom generation may not be able to afford to retire? Or there's something's rotten in the pension programs of America?
Absolutely. If you look at the baby boom generation, and if you were to do a study of what does your average baby boomer look like, do they have health insurance? Are they overweight? How much do they have in savings? How much do they have in pensions? The picture that emerges is very bleak. I mean, I could go through those each of those issues. They say 78% of all Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. My research is that the average 401k balance is about $25,000, and this is for people in their 50s and 60s. The lack of health insurance is a big issue. So the future is very bleak for most baby boomers. I think it's over half of Americans who are retired. They depend on Social Security, predominantly on Social Security to live on, which is not a lot of money. So that's the demographic issue. And then in terms of pensions, I tell people a simple way to understand pensions is that there are 3 drivers to the health of the pension system. One is how much money goes into the pension system. 2 is how the money in the pension system is managed. And 3 is how much money is paid out of the pension in the form of benefits. For the majority of pensions in the United States, certainly public pensions, state and local pensions, there is not enough money going in. The money is being invested terribly, performing well below any S&P 500 index. And the benefits, I don't view the benefits as generally being that high. Some people focus on that the benefits are too rich. For some people they are, but the overwhelming majority, they're not. The overwhelming majority of policemen, firemen, school teachers are not retiring with a lot of money coming into it. But certainly the mismanagement of the pension money is a big, big issue, and the one that's most often overlooked.
And that's what you write about in some of the papers I've read about you, is that it's not just mismanagement, it's actually stupidity and corruption by the fund managers, not the police officers, not the firemen, not the teachers, but the people that they trust their pension to are either corrupt, incompetent, or completely have no idea what they're doing. Am I summarizing that correctly?
Yeah, I wrote an article called Top 10 Reasons Why Stealing from a Public Pension is a smart idea. And when you look at public pensions, one of the big problems is they are not subject to any comprehensive law. So ERISA is the federal law that protects private corporate pensions.
Right. For those who may not know, ERISA protects your 401ks, and those are private or IRAs. But if you work for the government and you have a public pension, like California's CalPERS, then there's no oversight. There's nobody watching what the so-called managers are doing. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, the ERISA does not apply. The huge loophole to ERISA is that public pension money is not governed by ERISA. So that's a big safeguard that the federal law that protects retirement savings does not apply to state and local pensions. The next big issue is that the boards of these pensions there's no requirement that the board of directors of these pensions have any training in investment matters. So most state and local pensions, the board consists of policemen, kindergarten teachers, sanitation workers, people who are not at all knowledgeable about financial matters, and then they, hire Wall Street to watch over their money. So you've got a board of civil servants trying to do business with some of the craftiest sharks in the world, Wall Street.
And the article I saw you wrote, you say a lot of these more exotic investments like private equity and then hedge funds, they come to town, they wine and dine these lack of sophisticated managers. So they get free trips, booze, women, fun, and all this, which influences them to buy the banker's products. Is that correct?
Yeah. Wall Street basically has a unlimited checkbook to wine and dine clients in pursuit of, let's say, $100 million account. So I've gone with these board members and Wall Street guys on hot air balloons rides over Albuquerque, on helicopter rides over Maui, to Benihana Steakhouse in Honolulu, Ruth Chris, you name it. And that is what Wall Street does. They wine and dine state workers who are on these boards and show them the time of their lives. And that's how they get the contract.
I think I read that one of these boards invested in Beanie Babies or something.
Yes, that was the Ohio Bureau of Workers' Compensation, invested in Beanie Babies. And so I've seen any kind of ridiculous investment you can imagine. One of the most popular is right in your realm, real estate.
Yeah.
Well, generally, local pensions often invest in local real estate projects. So you'll have a pension that's financed a football stadium or a convention center, or something that's supposed to be economically targeting the locality.
So, Ted, this is very interesting. When we come back, we'll go more into it. But if you wouldn't mind, I think the issue is, what does the average person do, especially if you are one of those pensioners in a public pension plan. You have enough trouble if you're in a private one, like a 401k or IRA. But if you're in a public one, like CalPERS out of California or the Rhode Island system, what can you do? So, once again, this is Robert Kiyosaki. This has been one of the reasons we formed the Rich Dad Company. It's because we have no financial education in our schools. And the people that ripped us off during the subprime mortgage era are ripping us off in the pension area. When we come back, you'll find more from Ted Siedle, the founder of Benchmark Financial Services, and he's an insider who's blown the whistle on some of these corrupt and mismanaged pension funds.
You're listening to the Rich Dad Radio Show with Robert Kiyosaki.
Don't be like Charlie. Charlie is that do-it-yourselfer who does himself in. Do-it-yourself is good for tile and grout. It is not good for asset protection. Charlie thought he'd save a few dollars forming his LLC online. With no guidance, he did it wrong. When he sold the property, he lost thousands and thousands of dollars. He did himself in by trying to do it himself. Don't burn yourself. Use Corporate Direct to set up and maintain your LLCs and corporations. Corporate Direct is owned and operated by attorney and rich dad advisor Garrett Sutton. Garrett wrote the bestsellers Loopholes of Real Estate and Start Your Own Corporation. He is Robert Kiyosaki's attorney for asset protection. He and his team will do it right. Visit them at corporatedirect.com or call 800-600-1760. Mention Rich Dad and receive $100 off your formation fee. That's corporatedirect.com, corporatedirect.com.
What is your number one expense in life? Your number one expense. It's taxes. And I've asked the question is, how come there's no financial education in school, but why isn't there education on taxes either? You know, they tell you to save money, which is stupid. They tell you to invest in the stock market, which is stupid. But won't they teach you about taxes? So here we have Rich Dad advisor Tom Wheelwright. We're talking about his revision for his book, Tax-Free Wealth. Welcome, Tom.
Thanks, Robert.
So what's the Tax-Free Wealth about? What's different this time? It's a revised edition.
Well, so what we did was this is the first major tax reform we've had in 30 years, 2017.
Right. Was 86 was the last one?
86 was the last one, back when I was in Washington, D.C.
So many guys got wiped out because of that tax change.
They did. They did. It wiped out an entire industry, savings and loans. This new tax law is just as big, but in a very different way. It affects different industries. You know, the tax law is always a series of incentives. And the question is always which incentives and which ones apply to me. And so the key to revising tax-free wealth was, what changed so much in this new tax law that we can absolutely take advantage of? Seriously, the amazing incentives. For example, the bonus depreciation, for example, for real estate is unbelievable. You buy a $1 million apartment, get a $300,000 deduction or more the very first year.
So if you want to make more money and pay less taxes like Donald Trump and myself, get Tom's book, Tax-Free Wealth.
Log on to richdadradio.com while you listen. Now back to Robert Kiyosaki.
Welcome back, Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news and bad news about money. You can listen to the Rich Dad Radio program anytime, anywhere on iTunes or Android. And all of our programs are archived at richdadradio.com. So you can listen to this program again because we're an education company. We don't make recommendations or sell much. And if you listen to this program again with Ted Siedle, founder of Benchmark Financial Services, but more importantly, if you're in a public pension or you have a relative that's in a public pension, this is a very important program for you. So listen to this program again, then have your friends, family, or business associates listen to it, because my prediction is this pension crisis is going to be the next subprime crisis. This one could be the very big one. And my concern is my generation, the baby boomers, are not prepared for what's going to come, because baby boomers are out of time and out of money. At least in 2007, they had some time, and they had time to make some money back. This next crash might wipe them out, might wipe all of us out. And if you're a millennial or a child of a baby boomer, pay especially close attention to this and discuss it with your baby boomer parent or grandparent. So once again, our guest today is Ted Siedle. He is the founder of Benchmark Financial Services. So Ted, thank you for being on this program. Can you tell us a little bit about CalPERS, which is the nation's largest public pension plan?
Yeah, I've known CalPERS since 1990, and I've known their board members. And it obviously is the nation's largest public pension. And for many years, it enjoyed a reputation as being sort of the gold standard, that CalPERS was so big, so professionally well managed, that they were always on the cutting edge, and they were the standard other pensions should strive to meet. But over the last 20 years, it's become increasingly obvious that they're not at all the gold standard. They have been rocked by scandal after scandal. I wrote an article in May 2017 called How to Steal a Lot of Money from CalPERS. And the first line in the article was, how hard would it be to steal millions from CalPERS, the nation's largest public pension with $320 billion in assets? Easy peasy was the answer. So, and it talked about, I started by in the article talking about how in an 2015 meeting, the board admitted they didn't even know what the fees they were paying to Wall Street money managers. So it is a very poorly managed pension that loses a lot of money because of politicalization. I call it politicization of the investment process and other mismanagement.
My attorney, who follows all this, he said that CalPERS was sued to find out how far underwater CalPERS was, and he said it was $1 trillion. Can you verify that or no?
I'm not familiar with that study. All I know is that that it underperforms chronically, and the fees that it pays are astronomical, and billions higher than it needs to. So I sent a letter to the board, I think it was about 8 years ago, saying that I was aware of investment wrongdoing related to the pension, and I would be prepared to meet with the board to discuss it. And they had no interest in meeting with me at all.
I wonder why.
A board member at CalPERS asked me to send the letter. He walked it in, and they were not interested. And one of the board members said, "How is this letter from Siedle any different from the thousands of others we received?" And I said, my response to that was, look, if you're getting thousands of letters from leading experts in pension forensics that something you're doing is wrong, then that's really screwed up. Obviously, they're not getting those letters. My letter was unique. My credentials were unique. There were very compelling reasons to meet with me. No financial downside. I wasn't asking them to pay me to meet with me. So all that could have happened is they could have learned, but they didn't want to learn what I had to say. So that was the downside.
You think they're covering up something?
Oh, they certainly are covering up something. One of the good things about public pensions for your listeners is that they are public. Their minutes of meetings, their contracts and things are generally available under state public records or Freedom of Information Act law. So your listeners should, if they have concerns, write to the pension and ask to see the documents. Most public pensions, all the ones I'm aware of today, have websites and post a lot of the documents about the pension, performance reports. The information is often wrong, but you can get a lot of information from their website and from public records requests.
But Ted, you say that this is your forte, this is your strength. You go in and take a look at it. The average person probably could not see what you see. Now, moving on, you went after the pension of Rhode Island. What did you find there? And as a whistleblower, there was a large award going out?
I think you might be confusing two things, but I recently received the largest whistleblower award in history from the CFTC, $30 million.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Well deserved.
Yeah.
And then the largest award in history from the SEC of $48 million.
Oh, okay.
So
what is a CFTC?
The CFTC is like the SEC, but they regulate commodities trading, the commodities markets, and the SEC regulates the securities markets. Most mutual funds, for example, invest in commodities and stocks. Most mutual funds do futures, options, whatever, as well as investing in stocks and bonds.
Okay.
So that was the biggest whistleblower award in history that I received, total of $78 million. When I went to Rhode Island a few years ago, actually 6 years ago, in 2013, the new treasurer of Rhode Island, who was very popular Democrat, said she had found a way to solve the nation's retirement crisis. And the way to do that was to get workers to agree to accept less benefits than they'd been promised. So she attempted to cut the benefits. They went to court. The court agreed she could do this. So workers' benefits in Rhode Island were slashed and by 3%. the cost of living adjustment was eliminated. So that was part of the story, was she was going to cut benefits. What she didn't tell workers and taxpayers was she was going to gamble the money in hedge funds.
Huh.
So she ended up cutting workers' benefits by 3% and paying Wall Street 4%. Hedge funds charge fees of 2% plus 20% of the gains, which amounts to about 4%. So it was a sort of sleight of hand where she said that by cutting workers' benefits, the pension would be restored. Less money would be going out of the pension. But what she didn't tell them was that by paying Wall Street more, the pension would actually be worse off. And that's what happened. That's what I exposed in Rhode Island in 2013, that this was not an austerity program. This was not pension reform. This was basically taking 3% from workers to give Wall Street 4%.
Wow. When you think about the mindset that would have done something like that. And by the way, did Wall Street pay off on that 4%? I mean, did it make sense? I mean, if they returned 20%, it would be great, but you're paying them 4% and you're losing money. That's a whole other story.
Oh, no, they did terribly. As I predicted, and as at the time in 2013, Warren Buffett had warned public pensions all over the country not to invest in hedge funds. I don't know if your listeners know it, but Warren Buffett very publicly bet a group of hedge funds $1 million that they would underperform the stock market over the next 10 years. And they were foolish enough to take that bet against Warren Buffett. And your readers can look online. The results of the bet were that Buffett handily won. The hedge funds dramatically underperformed the stock market. And in 2013, in Rhode Island, the pension was told, do not do this, by investment luminaries like Warren Buffett, John Bogle, and Ted Siedle. But they went ahead with the gamble, and it ended up losing $500 million in the first 8 years.
So how does that affect the pensioner in Rhode Island? What does that mean to them?
Well, I mean, what it means is that their benefits were cut to supposedly make the pension more sustainable, but then the people running the pension gambled, so the pension's actually worse off, or certainly no better off. So they took a pay cut for nothing.
Jeez.
Their benefits were cut, and the pension ended up losing far more than the pension saved by cutting workers' benefits.
Say, did you hear this latest thing I heard just recently, that New Jersey, because their pension is so depleted, they're now going to charge a rain tax on New Jersey's residents?
I haven't heard that, but I do know that New Jersey has been terribly managed for decades, and I believe is one of the worst pensions. Kentucky is on the verge of bankruptcy, but New Jersey and Illinois are certainly poster childs for how not to run a pension.
And since I'm from Hawaii, how is Hawaii doing?
I haven't checked on Hawaii lately. There was an investigation I was proposing to do in Hawaii about, and that was 15 years ago. You know, the first public pension to fail was Saipan.
Oh.
So I was out giving a speech in Guam and Saipan, and Saipan attempted to go bankrupt to
not pay the employees.
Right. So Hawaii, I'm not sure of where they're at today. I do know that there was an investigation I tried to do of something I was aware of there, but nobody wanted the investigation done.
And then what is wrong with Kentucky?
Well, Kentucky, I say, is the worst because they are only, at this point, I think 12% funded.
Jeez.
So you can look up the exact number, but the point is they have 12 cents for every dollar they promised workers. And when you get to that low a level, you are basically spending all the money you have. The money you're basically more money is going out, and the end is within view, within a few years away. So the investment program in Kentucky has been terribly managed for decades, and the pension's about to run out of money. There is a lawsuit being brought against the board, or at least I think it's against all the Wall Street firms, the hedge funds that mismanage the pension. But it is, and of course, let us not forget Puerto Rico, another public pension, U.S. pension, that has run out of money. So there are,
Jeez.
Puerto Rico is an example of what happens when pensions expire. Saipan is an example. Kentucky is an example. And then Illinois and New Jersey and many other states are, Connecticut are cases where the amount of money the pension owes is just astronomically greater than the amount of money that's actually in the pension.
So the final question then is, if I'm living in Kentucky or Saipan or Puerto Rico or Illinois or California, I'm counting on CalPERS, what can a person do? Let's say you're 60 years old, you're set to retire in a few years, and your pension's about to go bust. Do you have any suggestions for them?
What you can do is because they're public pensions, you can request documents, get information, you can see if you can attend meetings, you can go to the website. And what I encourage people to do is to have an investigation done of the pension of your own. I crowdfunded an investigation on behalf of workers in Rhode Island. They raised $30,000 to have me investigate what was going on in the pension. And so nowadays, and that can be, as little as like $100 per person, or less, $50 per person. In California, the pension is so big, has so many participants, that to have an independent professional expert review done would really cost the workers less than an evening out for dinner. So I would suggest it is. The crowdfunding, the internet offers that possibility because, as you say, they can get the documents, but unless you're an expert in this field, you're not going to know what to make of it.
Correct. Well,
but
Ted,
I would encourage people to be a thorn in the side of these systems. Let the people running these systems know members are concerned and are active and are going to be watching them.
Well, Ted, thank you very much. Wish you had more time. I'd like to have you come back on this program. But thank you for doing what you're doing, and especially to, be a whistleblower, but be a great informant and teacher on a very important crisis facing America today. So thank you again, Ted.
Thank you.
And we come back with the most popular part of our program, which is Ask Robert.
You're listening to the Rich Dad Radio Show with Robert Kiyosaki.
Don't be like Charlie. Charlie is that do-it-yourselfer who does himself in. Do-it-yourself is good for tile and grout. It is not good for asset protection. Charlie thought he'd save a few dollars forming his LLC online. With no guidance, he did it wrong. When he sold the property, he lost thousands and thousands of dollars. He did himself in by trying to do it himself. Don't burn yourself. Use Corporate Direct to set up and maintain your LLCs and corporations. Corporate Direct is owned and operated by attorney and rich dad advisor Garrett Sutton. Garrett wrote the bestsellers Loopholes of Real Estate and Start Your Own Corporation. He is Robert Kiyosaki's attorney for asset protection. He and his team will do it right. Visit them at corporatedirect.com or call 800-600-1760. Mention Rich Dad and receive $100 off your formation fee. That's corporatedirect.com. corporatedirect.com.
It pays to listen. Now back to Robert Kiyosaki and the Rich Dad Radio Show.
Welcome back. Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news and bad news about pensions. And again, I want to thank Ted Siedle. His He's talking about the next retirement crisis. I've been concerned about this for years. That's why I wrote Rich Dad's Prophecy, how the biggest stock market crash is coming. And what you'll find out why the crash is coming is the very people that brought us the crash of 2007, 2008 are the very same organizations that will bring us a crash of pensions. It's Goldman Sachs, Bear Stearns, Lehman Brothers. They're all some of them out of business. But the very same problem still exists. And instead of the homeowners getting ripped off, this time it's going to be the pensioners ripped off. So that's where the next crash is coming from, and that's why I wrote Rich Dad's Prophecy a while ago. So anyway, I want to thank Ted. His website is benchmarkalert.com. Please get his articles. He's a very prolific writer. He's a great writer, and you'll learn a lot more. So once again, you can listen to the Rich Dad Radio Show anytime, anywhere on iTunes or Android, and all our programs are archived at richdadradio.com. We archive them so you can listen to this program again. And after you listen to this again, you'll hear a lot more, you'll learn a lot more, but most importantly, get your friends, family, and business associates to listen to this program and discuss it. Because trust me, this is the next crisis, and it's on its way right now. And the worst thing is baby boomers my age are out of time and out of money. So even if you're a young person, you're going to say, well, what happens if my father or my grandfather has no place to live or his retirement is gone? What happens if his pension is bankrupt? What do I do then? What do I do about taking care of his health or her health? That's why this Rich Dad program is created, so you get an insider view that Wall Street or Bubble Vision or the papers will never report. So anyway, thank you to Ted Siedle. And what's the first question?
Our question today, Robert, comes from Sophia in New York. Favorite book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. She says, Robert, I hear you ringing the bell on the coming pension crisis. I'm nearing retirement age, but I'm fearful that something will happen and I'm somehow not going to be able to access my pension in my retirement years. Do you know what happens to people's pensions if a company closes or files for bankruptcy?
Well, first of all, thank you for paying attention to the Rich Dad Radio Show, and I feel for you right now. As you know, the story of my rich dad and poor dad was my poor dad lost his job at 50, and he never recovered. He had nothing. He spent his pension trying to start a business, and he had nothing. So if there's a compelling reason for me to create Rich Dad, the Rich Dad Company, and talk and speak, it's because we're facing a crisis. I don't think anybody knows how big this crisis is. I mean, I don't. But it's estimated to be over a $225 trillion problem, unfunded. That's how much money they're short. So you think the last bailout was big. That last bailout was only like 40 trillion. This is 250 trillion. So that's why I wrote Rich Dad's Prophecy, and that's what Rich Dad Company was formed. But to answer your question, a big question is who is the insurance company behind your pension? If it's the PBGC, the Public Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporation, it's like the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. So the FDIC backs up your savings. The trouble is FDIC is bankrupt. You know, if there's a run on the bank, there's not enough money in the FDIC to cover the $250,000 they promised me to get my money back. So Kim and I have a problem of excess cash, and we started broke, but we just kept following our plan. And so we have $250,000 deposits all over in different banks and all that. But what if FDIC is not there? And it's the same thing for the PBGC, the Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporation. It's bankrupt also. The good news is you're early. You can do something about it yet before the crash comes. So again, that's why I write, that's why I talk. But my whole thing here is this. I think it's important that you take responsibility for your education, your financial education, because our school teachers know nothing either. As Ted Siedle talked about, many of these pensions are managed by school teachers, firefighters, and all that, people who know nothing. And then Wall Street comes in with their private equity and hedge funds and takes advantage of uneducated public employees. So, ladies and gentlemen, I wish I had a quick answer for you, but I don't. But I thank you for listening to this program, and I thank Ted Siedle again. And once again, you can submit your questions to AskRobert at richdadradio.com. Thank you for listening to the Rich Dad Radio Show.